For objective 1.6, I have another one of the Goldberg variations. This is number 21, J.S. Bach. Let's listen to a little bit of it. Okay, so objective 1.6 asks us to identify the notes of the keyboard using correct letter name and octave numbers. If you've used the learning resources, you are now familiar with the idea of letter names for all the keys on the keyboard, as well as the proper octave number. This virtual piano that I have right here is not a full 88 key keyboard, so we won't have every single key accounted for. But if we recognize this note as middle C, we can assume that is C4, and all the notes above it until we get to the next C are part of octave 4. The notes below it, all the way down to this C, are all part of octave 3. So this is C3, C sharp or D flat 3, D3, and so on. And then the next few objectives ask us to know the lines and spaces of the various clefs: treble, bass, alto, and tenor. So let us look at, we have a treble clef and a bass clef right here. And again, I'll play just the beginning of it. And I'm going to deal with the bass line first, so you should be able to tell me what pitches these are. And in the bass clef line, we know that this is the G. We also know that this is a G. This is the G that's directly below middle C. So if this is middle C, we're talking about this G on the keyboard. This G on the keyboard would be called G3, therefore this is G3. The G prior to that, this one over here, is this G on the keyboard, and that would be part of the second octave, so we have G2. So these notes of the bass clef would be G2 up to G3, down to F sharp 3, down to F natural 3, all part of the third octave. In this treble clef that we have up on the top, let's look at this line of 16th notes up here. This is an A, and if this is the A above middle C, so if this is C, middle C, C4, then we're talking about this A on the keyboard. So this would be called A4. This one would be called B flat 4. And it's flat because we have a key signature that's telling us to have it be flat. That's for a later objective. This one would be C5, which is the C above middle C. It'd be this C on the keyboard. To show you some alto clef examples, as is part of objective 1.9, I've brought up a string quartet by Haydn. Here we have the violin 1 line is up here, violin 2 line is this staff, the viola line, which features the alto clef, is this staff, and the cello line is the bottom staff in bass clef. Let's listen to a little bit of this. And here's the viola line. Step right there. All right, so let's look at this alto line a little bit, and we'll look at it when it's playing single notes right here. All right, in the alto clef, you've learned the lines and spaces are different than the treble clef and the bass clef. Here, the alto line or the viola is coming in on the note E, and this is the E above C4. So let me bring up my keyboard. So if this is C4, then this is E4, and that's referring to this pitch. This is middle C, that's this pitch. This is an A, it's A3, which is this pitch on the keyboard. This is a D, which is this pitch on the keyboard, D4. This is a B, which is this key on the keyboard. Objective 1.10 tells us to identify correctly drawn notes of the tenor clef. And I brought up a piece by Edvard Grieg, The Hall of the Mountain King. This is the middle of the piece, measure 52. Let's listen to a little bit of it at this point. And this is a full orchestral piece. You can see down the line we have the flute and piccolo, we have the oboes, the clarinets, the bassoons. These are the horns, this is the trumpets. And what I want us to look at is the trombone lines. Let me zoom into that. And we'll notice that the upper trombone line is in the tenor clef. So let's look at these notes that are written in the tenor clef. This first one is right on the line of the tenor clef that is pointing to, so that is some sort of C. In fact, it's a C sharp. It's a C sharp because we have a sharp in the key signature over here. The note above that is on the E line of the tenor clef and has a sharp sign in front of it, so it's an E sharp. And then over here, both of them become natural, so we have C natural and E natural. So that would be this C4 and this E natural 4. The next one that we see is on the B line. The B space in this case. So that's a B3, and then we have a D4 right there if we're reading it in tenor clef correctly. Objective 1.11 talks about ledger lines above and below the staff. For this one I have The Marriage of Figaro by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Let's listen to just a little bit of the middle of this piece. And I'm going to zoom in and show you the flute line. All right, here we are, and we have the flute line on the very top staff. Let's listen to this little section. We'll see we have multiple notes on the same staff. A flute player can't play both of these notes at the same time, but this would be an indication that we'd have more than one flute player. So we'd have one player playing this top note, one player playing this lower note. Makes it a little bit more challenging from a reading standpoint to figure out which notes these exactly are. But the point of the objective states that when we run out of the 5 lines that are on the music staff, we can extend that staff up or down, basically unlimited. We're only limited by the range of the actual instruments of what they can play. All right, so if this is a treble clef on the flute line, this top line is F, and then the space would be G, and then this line would be A, and the space of that is B, and then we arrive at this first note here, which is on a line. This is the line C, and with the octave number, that would be C6, because C4 is down here is middle C, C5 is over here, and this one is C6. If we keep extending the ledger lines up, there would be a space right above the C, which would be D, and then there's a line right here. This is an E. So right over here we have a C and an E stacked on top of each other. If you pause the video and figure out these, I'll let you know what the rest of those are. All right, so this is a B above the staff. This one over here is a D above the staff. And it works that way for treble clef, and it also extends the clefs for all other clefs. Objective 1.12 says identify and notate pitches on the grand staff, which is also known as the piano staff. For this one, I have the first movement of the Beethoven Moonlight Sonata. Let's listen to a little bit of that. So the grand staff is the combination of having a treble clef and a bass clef, and it's bracketed together. It's most often used when you're doing piano music, And usually what it means is items that are written in this top line are played by the right hand, and items that are listed in this bottom line are played by the left hand. That's not always the case, but that's generally true. Now, sometimes students get a little confused by this because they think that the treble clef or the upper staff can only deal with a certain range of pitches, and that the lower staff can only deal with another its own range of pitches. And in fact, the treble clef and bass clef can both go an unlimited amount of pitches up or down. They can overlap, and we actually see that. This is a good example of looking at that right here in this measure 5. All of these notes up here are in the treble clef, so we're going to use the treble clef ledger lines and naming systems for it. So down here, this is a G. It's a G3. It's the G below C4. This is middle C. It's C4. For reference, on this piano, we're going to call this middle C, or C4. And if we look at the treble clef here, all of these notes that I'm circling are part of the treble clef at the moment. So we have a G. This happens to be the G below middle C. There is middle C. This is G3, C4, E4. And then we have those notes again. And we have those notes again. And up top, we also are playing the G4, which is up here. Now, on the bass clef, I'm going to look at these three notes that I'm pointing to right here. This first one is an E. It happens to be the E below middle C, so it's this one over here. And then we have a G, and then we have a C up here. Now, we haven't talked about key signatures yet in the course, and so some of these notes over here, like this isn't actually C, it's C sharp. This is not actually G, it's G sharp, but I'm just referencing the letter name at the moment. Those are sharp notes because they're affected by these sharps over here in what's called the key signature. Anyway, this is on the E space, this is on the G space, which makes it a G sharp, and this one is on the C line of the bass clef. Now remember that this line is C of the bass clef, C4, and this one up here is also C4. So in fact, this note here and this note here are both referring to the exact same pitch on the keyboard, C4 and then C4 in both cases. So it's not a direct overlap. In fact, this G that's right here in the treble clef is a lower pitch than this C, which is over in the bass clef. In fact, this G with the ledger lines is referring to G3, which is the same pitch as this G, which is G3 as notated in the bass clef. And in both cases, if you're a step ahead of me from the key signature, it would actually be a G sharp or G sharp 3, which is this note.